Consumer Reports wants Autopilot shut down, but the Dutch don't seem to mind. Tesla has reviewed the crash logs from the recent Pennsylvania incident. We have some new and notable superchargers being deployed, and we end with some glamour shots of the Model 3 and the Model X. Here are your Tesla tidbits for July 14th, 2016. We start with a story that is two sides of the same coin. Consumer Reports has published an article detailing their reasoning for wanting Tesla to disable Autopilot. Electrek brings us their demands, and Tesla's response of, well, no. Consumer Reports asks the following in the article, quote, disable auto steer until it can be reprogrammed to require drivers to keep their hands on the steering wheel. Stop referring to the system as Autopilot, as it is misleading and potentially dangerous. Issue clearer guidance to owners on how the system should be used and its limitations. Test all safety-critical systems before public deployment. No more beta releases. End quote. On the first point, Tesla already warns drivers to keep their hands on the wheel, as well as making checks to ensure this is the case and telling drivers to put their hands back on the wheel if they're not there. Elon has already addressed the second point in that the system is named after the aviation version, which also still places ultimate responsibility in the hands of the pilot of the aircraft. We already had a story on the third point, wherein Tesla plans a blog post to further education of the feature. And lastly, in another story we covered, the word beta doesn't quite hold the same meaning to Tesla as it may in the computer world. Elon's tweet regarding the beta attached to Autopilot clarified that Tesla considers the system beta until it has seen use on 1 billion miles of real-world roads. Try saying that 3 times fast. It does not mean that the system is not feature complete or that it is a danger. Tesla's response was only slightly cheeky. Quote, Tesla is constantly introducing enhancements proven over millions of miles of internal testing to ensure that drivers supported by Autopilot remain safer than those operating without assistance. We will continue to develop, validate, and release those enhancements as technology grows. While we appreciate the well-meaning advice from any individual or group, we make our decisions on the basis of real-world data, not speculation by media. End quote. On the other side of the coin are Dutch officials saying they're not concerned with Autopilot. After a story earlier this week where German authorities said they would not approve of Autopilot if it were incomplete software, Dutch authorities said they're just fine with the system. German publication Spiegel reached out to Hans Lammers, I hope I pronounced that right, who is responsible for vehicle registrations and monitoring by the Public Authority, RDW, in the Netherlands. He had this to say, quote, we think there is nothing wrong with the system, if it is used correctly. As regards to the function, there is no difference to systems that are approved for other manufacturers, end quote. Last week, we had a story of a Model X finding trouble on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Albert Scaglione, I hope I'm pronouncing that right too, the car's owner, as well as a passenger, crashed, and Scaglione alleged that Autopilot was active at the time of the crash. Now folks, I don't know why you all continue to say things like this when you know that Tesla can, does, and will publish the insanely detailed logs of what the car was doing at the time of any incident. Elon tweeted the following today, quote, onboard vehicle logs show Autopilot was turned off in the Pennsylvania crash. Moreover, crash would not have occurred if it was on, end quote. Jalopnik then has further information from a Tesla spokesperson, quote, we got access to the logs. Data from the vehicle shows that auto steer was not engaged at the time of the collision. Prior to the collision, auto steer was in use periodically throughout the approximately 50-minute trip. The most recent such use ended when, approximately 40 seconds prior to the collision, the vehicle did not detect the driver's hands on the wheel. You notice that there, Consumer Reports? The vehicle did not detect the driver's hands on the wheel and began a rapidly escalating set of visual and audible alerts to ensure the driver took proper control. When the driver failed to respond to 15 seconds of visual warnings and audible tones, auto steer began a graceful abort procedure in which the music is muted, the vehicle begins to slow, and the driver is instructed both visually and audibly to place their hands on the wheel. Approximately 11 seconds prior to the collision, the driver responded and regained control by holding the steering wheel, applying leftward torque to turn it, and pressing the accelerator pedal to 42%. Over 10 seconds and approximately 300 meters later, and while under a manual steering control, the driver drifted out of the lane, collided with a barrier, overcorrected, crossed both lanes of the highway, struck a median barrier, and rolled the vehicle. End quote. The Supercharger network is getting a bit of a boost in the northeast of North America. Electrek reports that we have Superchargers that have been opened or are near completion in New York in Plattsburgh and north of Albany in Queensbury in the U.S. In Canada, we also have Superchargers going up in Montreal and Magog. Always nice to see the network building out. Lastly, Evan X has a regular feature called Tesla Eye Candy. The feature takes the best Tesla photos they can find on Instagram and curates them for the feature. This one definitely does not disappoint. Installment 63 features the work of Anton Watts, a renowned automotive photographer, and he's got some pictures of Model 3 and Model X, some of which haven't been seen before. Please check out the work and the video at the end as well that shows how some of those shots came to be. You can find links to the full stories from this episode in the description of the show. If you get some value out of what you hear every day, please consider supporting the podcast at patreon.com/Tesla Tidbits. All support will go directly to my Model 3 fund, and every bit is appreciated. Thanks so much to my super patron, John Walthour, for his support. If you have nothing extra to kick my way, it's no big deal. You can still continue to show your support with positive reviews, likes, and subscriptions on your favorite media services, and by spreading word of the show to other Tesla lovers. If you have questions or feedback for me, you can hit me up via email by messaging podcast@teslatidbits.com or on Twitter @TeslaTidbits. That's it for today. Hope to see you back here tomorrow. Until then, keep it charged and hit the road.